kind of means for us to entertain ourselves. Kind of going with the sweeping openings of late, aren't I? Anyway, with their specially marked boards and counters depicting everything from army strategy to 70s sitcoms depicting life in the 50s to more obscure intellectual properties, they've been there to help us have fun and enjoy time with friends. Because as we all know, playing a board game by yourself is a sad, sad thing. And today we'll be taking a look at the board game Arkham Horror, based off the works of H.P. Lovecraft and produced by Fantasy Flight Games. So yes, Lovecraft. Born Howard Phillips Lovecraft, he was a child with a lot of issues, to put it lightly. To explain...
No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
His father went mad due to syphilitic dementia and later died, and his mother eventually succumbed to hysteria and depression. Along with these emotional scars was the fact that he was frequently sick as a child and suffered from anxiety and night terrors. Oh, the suffering of little children. Throw on top of that a love of gothic horror inspired by his maternal grandfather, and you have a veritable bubbling cauldron of potential. As he got older, he suffered from a keen sense of alienation, social and otherwise, due in large part to his aristocratic self-image and sense of arrogance, along with an OCD focus on order and the inability to change, or deal with others telling him he needed to adapt. Then there's also the very strong possibility that his mother never hugged him. No, really, this actually might be a thing. It's quite possible he didn't receive any physical affections from his family. Anyway, this all went to his writing. Often considered the 20th century successor to Poe, he was quite skilled in building atmosphere and implying a great many details without actually saying anything. What really defined his work, however, and was a major gear shift in the horror genre, was his literary philosophy of cosmic horror or cosmicism. It's the idea that there is no divine higher power, and man is insignificant to the universe, and life is incomprehensible and hostile to mankind. Not hostile in the hatred kind of way, but in the alien kind of way. That the suffering and destruction of man is simply a byproduct of the agendas of larger cosmic entities that Lovecraft wrote about, and that trying to understand these beings will drive you mad. To make a long story short,
Too late.
he took the idea that someone up there loved the heroes out of the equation and thus took away their source of comforting strength, leaving them to fight alone against impossible odds. This is not to say his work is flawless. He was prone to purple prose on more than one occasion, and he was an Anglo-centric racist. No sugarcoating it, he was. All in all, his body of work, called the Cthulhu mythos, is an interesting one, although at times I do get the impression there might be a little bit of an oversaturation going on. Kind of like zombies, or Deadpool, or Zombie Deadpool. Ultimately, there is appeal to be had, and for me the appeal is, what is so terrifying that some of these characters, who believe in no higher power or life hereafter, would consider suicide the preferable alternative to what they are facing? In the mythos, there was a section of Massachusetts referred to as Lovecraft Country. It was the private literary playground of Lovecraft. The part of his shared world where he alone could write, and the capital, so to speak, was the city of Arkham. No, not Batman's Arkham, but Lovecraft's Arkham probably was an inspiration. A place where people go crazy. Go figure. Anyway, the game takes place in Arkham, but creepy stuff happens in Arkham. It's up to the investigators to save their new home. The players play a character from a stack of characters provided, such as Ashcan Pete, the hobo, Dexter Drake, Little Timmy's birthday performer, Jenny Barnes, who I thought looked like a guy at first, not entirely sure why, and Harvey Walters. Each character has a number of stats and starting equipment which they can use to fight, move, and cast spells. Each character has its strengths and weaknesses, which determines how they play, although the stats can be adjusted as part of the player's plans to handle the various situations they might come across. The characters then go around looking for clues to fight the mythos threat while fighting monsters. Monsters such as the Night Gaunts, creatures directly inspired by Lovecraft's night terrors, some tempting witches, some not so tempting vampires, take that teen paranormal romance, Chthonians, and more. Besides fighting monsters, the main goal of the investigators is to close the portals that keep opening up in Arkham. If too many of these portals open up, they will awaken the Great Old Ones, or Outer Gods, the great alien and godlike monstrosities of Lovecraft's fevered imagination, like an evil alarm clock. Then again, all alarm clocks are evil. They will then go about ending humanity as they reclaim the Earth. The main way to prevent this is to close or seal the portals, closing being the temporary option and sealing being the permanent one. Fighting monsters and closing portals all while trying to keep your sanity? How do the investigators do this? Well, any action is accomplished by stating what you want to do and rolling a number of six-sided dice. Namely, this game has a dice pool mechanic for action resolution. To determine your dice pool, add your stat value and the value of any weapon or special effect you have together, and that is your base dice pool. Then you subtract any penalties the situation might throw at you, and the final result is the amount you roll. Roll and count how many 5s and 6s you got. These are your successes. If you garnered enough successes, you have passed the challenge and may continue fighting the big fight. Note also that you can spend clue tokens to give an additional die for that needed boost. But this is a horror-themed game. Where is the fear and rising tension? I'm glad you asked, because how much your Great Old One is awake is represented by your Doom track. Each of these uber monsters has a doom track. If this track is ever full, the great beast awakens and the endgame ensues. The various supernatural events that plague Arkham during each turn can trigger an increase on the doom track, as can an overabundance of monsters hanging around the outskirts of the city, and the general mental state of the city's populace as represented by the terror track.
Can't you just feel the terror?
If the Eldritch Horror awakens, there is still a chance of victory, however. The investigators can then engage the creature in an attempt to beat it back. If in the ensuing fight the investigators can reduce the doom track to 0, they win. Which horror they fight is determined at random, and each has a different amount on their doom track. These monsters range from the quintessential Cthulhu himself, to Yogg-Sothoth, to the one I've never really been comfortable saying, to the blind idiot god himself, Azathoth. Although if Azathoth awakens, there is no endgame, no second chances, you're simply dead.
Azathoth owns.
So upon sealing the right number of portals, or if all else fails, a last-ditch effort against forces not meant to be understood, you win with Arkham and the world being saved.
Before I get to my final thoughts, there are 3 points I want to mention. Firstly, although the recommended number of players is 2 to 3, the game itself is quite playable as a one-person game. This shouldn't be a surprise. How often do we play one-person games on our electronics?
You got a minute? Gonna wait for a bit. I'm in the middle of some calibrations.
Oh, Gears, squee. Why should a board game be any different? Second is that Arkham Horror is a cooperative game. The investigators work together to save the world from the great old ones. So if you want a game that doesn't involve more experienced players predating on the noobs that you are, this is a good game of choice. And third, this is not a pickup game. Seriously, while the box says the game can be completed in 2 to 4 hours, expect the longer running time and probably longer. While not as long as, say, Monopoly, do expect to be engaged for a while and plan your schedule accordingly. All in all, Arkham Horror is a solid game with a good blend of both strategy and chance, with a good grasp of its source material and flavor. Alright, you could say that defeating your Eldritch Abomination is a bit against the themes espoused by Lovecraft, but one could say you're not so much beating the Abomination as forcing the door shut before it fully comes through and eats you. If you're a fan of the Cthulhu mythos or are looking for a game with some interesting supernatural flavor, I recommend this game. So enjoy the madness, and until later, farewell, my lovelies. Well, I'm glad that's done. One heck of a delay. I'm probably gonna regret this. Let's see. Dear Diary,